quick side note before I recount the horror I re-experienced. The background gameplay is from a recording I did years ago because my footage got corrupted and you could not pay me. Pay me with all the Nuka Victory in the world to play this mod again. But anyway, since I'm at the Goodsprings Saloon and my ride won't be here for, my watch is broken so I can't really tell. Why don't I tell you the tales of Alice in Shadowland? It all started when we made camp at Searchlight Airport, and at some point I was awoken by a weird, strange creature with long ears and fur. Yeah, it's got white fur. What kind of thing has white fur? And it begged me to follow it, promising me Nuka Victory, or maybe I was still dreaming. Little was I aware of the spiraling rabbit hole I found myself in. What I found down there is going to require some...
This loathsome device spews an abhorrent and ruinous mess. Why?
Alice in Shadowland, titled Alice in Shattered Wonderland in the ESM file, was created by Gagestorm and his team. It fell into the Nexus on October 5th, 2015, and was last updated a few months later on January 1st, 2016. The mod's description reads, "From the twisted mind of Gagestorm, but to be frank with you, the story and assets feel like an attempted fanfiction crossover with American McGee's Alice." And I'm not wrong to say that because the audio from his games are ripped and reused in the mod. The music as well, but I can let that slip because it's so darn good. The story of the mod, according to Gagestorm description, is... This tells the story of Alice Madeline and the Courier's desperate struggle for survival in shattered and tortured Wonderland, where all its inhabitants live for blood and insanity. Step into the crippling world of hate and despair as the Courier or your own Alice relives the nightmares that Wonderland scars within your mind and body. Welcome to Wonderland, and also a bunch of typos. And boy, do I have issues with how this translates to gameplay later. Story is a loose term here. On the features list, it proclaims to have deadly quests, custom soundtracks, fully voiced dialogue, custom weapons, perks, and in new areas. There's an optional rebalance in the description for a lower difficulty, and just you wait until I talk about that. As for YouTube, only one creator covered this nightmare itself, and that was Mr. New Vegas himself, The Breach, in a 7-episode playthrough. As for the overall reception by the community, well, that speaks for itself. There's a sequel in the works for Fallout 4 with a bigger team and better experience, with their own Facebook page, but the last post was made in 2019, and the history of the sequel is marked with development hell, loss of a team, and moving on for the future of a hopeful series. The Fallout 4 Alice in Shadowland is cancelled, but Gagestorm, as I quote, claims, but far from dead. Now you might want to start a tab, Tree, because this is going to be a long story about the...
Come, Alice, don't dawdle. There's no time to waste. There's no time at all. You've already missed the train.
Falling through the rabbit hole led me to a room with the ghouls and jumpsuits and tiny death claws that put me down more than I'll admit. Finding a note in a new rifle, I learned that a pre-war or post-war girl, it wasn't clarified I think, and her sister also found this place. Alice watched her sister be ripped apart and fled deeper into Wonderland, leaving me to follow the clues. Platforming along, playing cards, and being shot at, I made my way into some sort of castle where I found the next journal, weapon, and a shit ton of enemies. That line itself describes the whole mod, going from place to place, shooting more enemies than there should be, finding weapons ridiculously strong, and reading where Alice went to next. Cycle repeat. The card guards are no joke because their health and damage outpace the already better than my American way marksman carbine, and the amount of rounds I burned through on the first boss alone was abysmal. Eventually, you've carved your way past the Hatter, Duchess, Jabberwocky, Cruz, Tweedlefuck, and Tweedleshit, up until you find the Red Queen herself. No Alice, and that's it. You may have a player home, but to hell with that. Editing note, there is no player home. You know what I did with Shadowland, Wonderland? By the time it was over, I was ready to fight Deathclaws than anything in that hellhole. I have no connection to Alice nor care what happened to her. The quest was just fetching keys and shooting, lacking the RPG elements of Fallout. Typos galore and absolute unnecessary swearing. Like, my god in Zion, I know I swear occasionally, but this is awful. Just awful. But that doesn't even compare to the
nothing to fear? Forts! Fear of the dark, of heights, crowds, water, the number 9 fear of death? Granted, none of those, I think, but you certainly fear a return to the asylum. You fear the memories that brought you there. Ah, yes, you fear all that. Of course, it might be avoided.
The design of Shadowland certainly stands out aesthetically, but fails gameplay tremendously. There's wide open areas filled with card guards and whatnot. Whatever is thrown out there has godly amounts of health. What's the term? Oh yeah, bullet sponges. Bullet sponges equals this mod. Everything takes on an army depot's worth of munitions to bring down. The Jabberwocky's the first boss, and you know how much health he has? That giant motherfucker? 11,536. You know how much health the monster of the East, Leggett Linus, has? 920 at max, and 845 at the minimum. The legendary Boatfly? 2,000. Both are still difficult despite their health differences. You wanna know the Jabberwocky's difficulty? As the first boss, it has 11,536 and deals moderate damage, but that health drags the fight on. I used the debugger to finish it off after 10 minutes, and that pistol is supposed to one-shot everything. But none of these bosses take such. You wanna know the Mad Hatter's health? 165,000. Duchess, 120,000. Clock Guardian, 21,200. Jason the Ripper, 22,350. Tweedledee, 20,536. And Dumb, 25,536. Oh, and the Red Queen. Just you wait. Put in a guess. Any guess. Have you any guesses? Have you put any guesses into my jaw? If you said 4 million, then you'd be correct. The average Vorpal Blade does 350 damage, and Madeline's Cry does 138. I hope you have hours to waste. If your weapon doesn't have DPS, then you shouldn't bother at all. I stopped caring and used the debugger on everything. I can't even play American McGee's game without having war flashbacks. I don't know game design outside D&D, but I know you don't make the bosses nigh unkillable with weapons that slowly outpace each other to not being enough to make it fun. I don't even think a fat man armed with big boy rounds can make a dent.
You've kept me waiting, Alice. Have you never heard that punctuality's a virtue?
For as much as I ranted about bad, there are some things I enjoyed. One was the familiar music, and the other was the nif-bashed weapons scattered all throughout the mod. The only one I didn't like was the minigun because the texture overwrote Soaring's minigun, so I had to delete it. I do also have to credit the usage of art made by GageStorm, as it really sells it as their own aesthetic. But that can't help the feeling of trying to emulate American McGee with the music and ripping the contextless voice lines that don't line up with the story this mod puts us through. The story is exploring to find Alice, but none of the boss's dialogue even point to that idea. To them, you're Alice, but I'm Sergeant Lucky of the... not some Madeline girl. If I wanted that, I'd boot up Madness Returns. Getting killed by wannabe card guards in 1 to 2 hits isn't fun. Platforming in Fallout New Vegas isn't fun. Anything else but this is fun. Watching Willow try to convince me to get her pencils is a better alternative to this. I'd rather be Scrappy Doo, my nemesis, anyone but this mod's Alice. I think my point has been made. There is little to nothing else to talk about. No characters that stood out, because they're all ripped from another game and immediately choose to fight. The dialogue is barren and phallic, and the ending is only satisfying in the sense that it's over. I think it's time for my...
You've gotten a lot farther than you should have, but then you haven't met Frank Horrigan either. Your ride's over, Muty. time to die.
Alice's Shattered Wonderland, or Shadowland, whatever in Zion you call it, was a disaster through and through. This was their first real mod, so they get credit, but you have to playtest these things. At the bottom of this Nuka Victory, I found the worth. A strange meat pie out of a Nuka ColaVictory. The only reason to play it is for the weapons and the aesthetic, but that can't save it from the disaster it unfolds into. I'd rather watch an insane man poorly explain Hegelian dialectics than step foot in Shadowland again. I have no intentions to explain how I'd fix this or improve it without nearly scrapping the entire thing. If the mod author couldn't finish their remaster, yeah, they couldn't finish that, then why should I try to? Also, side note, they also had another ESM, a little expansion pack they were working on, but apparently their team crammed so much into it, put that thing through hell, that it committed self-ending, deleted itself. That's not a joke. That's not a joke.
As a hand-picked resident of Vault 76, it is your duty to carefully review your Vault-Tec-provided films yearly to fully prepare for the day when you will emerge.
So, Lookie, how did you get out of that? You know, that drug trip that you got put on? Who brought you back? Because we found you on the front door.